All right, today we're building the ultimate classic fragrance collection. These are 25 fragrances that I believe every serious fragrance collector like you should experience at least once. Some are over 100 years old. A lot of them have been reformulated over the decades they've been around, but every one of these are important fragrances and part of perfume history. So if you are a fragrance fanatic and you are building a fragrance collection, you must have these 25 fragrances in your collection. So I'm going to go over fragrances, 25 fragrances in chronological order. And I'm going to do 4 parts of this fragrance series airing every once in a while. So again, if you're a serious fragrance collector, really into fragrances, and you're mostly buying modern fragrances, you really need to get into some of the classics out there and the fragrances that actually became what fragrances are today. So let's get started with the list. Right at 1882, we're going to one of the masculine classics, one of the best masculine classics of all time. I'm talking about Houbigant's Fougère Royale. So this is not the 1882 version. This is the 2010 version. But since we can't get the 1882 version, we're fine with the 2010 edition. So this has been redone, reworked for modern times, but Fougère Royale is one of the classics that was launched in the 1800s, late 1800s by Paul Parquet, and he was recreating the smell of fern, if fern had a smell. So I think this is one of the most important fragrances in history of perfumery, and if it wasn't for this, we probably wouldn't have other Fougère fragrances like Tom Ford's Beau de Jour, and so on and so on. So what's great about this fragrance? It's green, it's aromatic, it's spicy, it's citrusy, mossy, and also coumarin. There's coumarin in the base. So you've got that shaving soap experience here, and it's created with lavender and a geranium note. And you have a very distinct smell with those specific ingredients or notes, and really an awesome scent. It's very masculine. I love this fragrance. I enjoy wearing it quite a bit. And even though I never smelled this as a young boy, stealing sprays from my dad's fragrances where he was wearing a lot of Fougères, I kind of see that this is a fragrance that actually paved the way for, Fougères that were in the 70s and 80s, and of course what we have today. So if you are into fragrance history, you should definitely have a bottle of Fougère Royale in your collection. Definitely worth it. Again, it's not the same fragrance that they launched in the 1800s, but it was recreated in 2010 for us to enjoy nowadays. By the way, if you came to Scentfest SF, we had brought over the Osmotech. They actually brought the original formulation of Fougère Royale. So if you attended the show, you would have been able to smell the original formulation of that fragrance. Let's move on to the house of Guerlain next. We've got a lot of Guerlain fragrances in this video, and we're talking about Jicky. So Jicky is also a Fougère fragrance, but I would say this is more of an amber Fougère style. There's warm vanillic notes here, and even though it has lavender, this is also a little on the animalic side, which I like the way it's done. I've discovered this kind of late, but I absolutely love this. This is such an amazing scent. And to have a little bit of a base that Shalimar has, but going into that Fougère direction with lavender and aromatic notes and things like that is so awesome, so amazing. And I'm so glad to have this because I don't know why I had skipped this. And everybody raves about Mitsouko. And I think Mitsouko is important, but I think this is more important. This is just an awesome, awesome scent. If you are a Guerlain fan and you haven't experienced this, check it out. If you're a Fougère fan, please check it out. If you like the Guerlain DNA, the warm, vanillic, amber tonka thing, definitely worth checking out. And I love the fact that it's got a little bit of funk, which makes this fragrance so awesome. So amazing. It's an awesome fragrance to have in your collection. Please make sure to get it and add it to your collection. Now, as I said, these fragrances are the current formulations. I'm not talking about vintage fragrances here. These are classic fragrances that are still in production. So I'm not going to make you hunt down vintage fragrances where it might be very complicated. So that's why I'm actually adding this fragrance on the list. And since Infiniment Coty brought it back and there's still stock out there, I'm going to talk about it. But before we talk about this, I do want to say Guerlain Jicky came out in 1889. So it was in the late 1800s. So it's a very historic fragrance. And this fragrance, Infiniment Coty's Ambre Antique, was originally launched in 1905. But Infiniment Coty brought it back last year. No, was it brought back in 2024? I think it was brought back in 2024. And it's an amber. It's a bit on the animalic side. There's funk here. And I can't remember. This actually, we had that at the Scent Fest as SF as well with the Osmotic. I believe they brought that. And I think it's fairly close to the original. It's a very resinous amber, but very powdery. It's got a lot of funk. It's very animalic. It's very musky as well. And I would say this is not super sweet. Even though you have sweet notes there, I don't think it's on the super sweet side, like let's say Grand Soir from the house of MFK, Maison Francis Kurkdjian. It's an amber. It's a very easy to wear amber, and they've stripped away all of the funk. Like recently, I bought some benzoin in the essential oil format, and I hate the way it smells, and I love the way benzoin smells. So I feel like the way that smells is not been like, it's not gone through a strainer and they've just given you whatever just has been created off of the actual resins. It's not been like purified and cleaned up and only the best parts have been saved. And I feel like this is like that. It's a bit on the rough side. And to me, that essential oil of benzoin is slightly animalic. So I feel like they've given this unneutered, unperfected, and giving you everything that they got from the extraction of the resin, which makes this fragrance, adventurous, not for the faint of heart. It's not easy to wear. And of course, back then in the early 1900s, the technology was not as advanced as it is now. So they weren't able to do things like that to strip away and clean up notes and ingredients. But for me, I think it's very important to have this because I'm a big fan of classic Coty fragrances, but they're hard to get. And I'm very happy they brought this back. I'm hoping they'll bring back Chypre. But if you can get your hands on a bottle of this, please do. I do have to say it's very pricey, only for the people that are really into classics and vintage fragrances and ones that would appreciate something that goes funky and animalic. And, of course, one of the classic amber fragrances here, 1905. Remember, the Shalimar came out in 1925. So that came out in 1905, 20 years before Shalimar came out. So amber was around back then in the early 1900s. So that's also an awesome thing. So that's Infiniment Coty Ambre Antique. Originally, it was launched by Coty. Now Coty, I think, is rebranding and things like that. So Infiniment Coty is more of their like niche collection of fragrances. Let's move on to the house of Acqua di Parma. It's Colonia. Yep, this is Colonia. I think it was originally launched at a barber shop. It's a citrus that has lots of aromatic notes. It's a bit barber shoppy, and I believe they were using this as a men's barbershop aftershave cologne thing for the guys. It's an eau de cologne, so it's very, very light. It has a lot of aromatics and spices, and of course a lot of citruses as well. It's a bit astringent. It's a sweet. I mean, it's tart, more tart sour than sweet, but you do have a lot of spices, a lot of lemony zing, and herbal aromatic spiciness in there. Maybe with some light grassy notes in the base and some woods there, but very fresh, easy to wear. And one of the best citrus fragrances or fresh fragrances ever made, I think. I think Acqua di Parma's Colonia smells awesome, even though it has old school touches. And if you like the eau de cologne style of fragrances, this is a must-have in your collection because it's a very, very important fragrance. And launched in 1916. So it's been around for a good 110 years or so. And it's still going strong. It's currently owned by LVMH. and probably these fragrances have been reformulated. Probably this didn't smell very similar to the original, but I feel like the idea is there, and it's definitely very important to have. So that's Acqua di Parma's Colonia from 1916. And then we're going to the house of Caron. It's Tabac Blonde. So as I said earlier, I'm featuring the latest versions of these fragrances. I'm not featuring vintage fragrances here because vintage is not easy to get. The current formulations of fragrances are easy to get. You can still buy these fragrances, the ones that I'm talking about. That's also another thing. I don't want to feature fragrances that you can't buy, because if you're building your collection, you want to be able to get these fragrances. Just keep in mind, these are not the original formulations of these fragrances. They've been around forever. So they've gone through many layers of reformulations, but these are pretty darn good for what they are right now, for fragrances that are over 100 years old. So yeah, Tabac Blonde is, to me, it's a leather fragrance, and the story, I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember the story. Something to do with women smoking and to cover up the smoke so they don't smell like it. I think it's something like that, but I apologize. I didn't research that particular story to give you the right story. But for me, it's a leather. It's a bit on the sweet side, very vintage, almost suede leather-like. But for sure, there's tobacco in the mix. And I think I get more leather from this than tobacco. In the end, also, it's kind of ambery in the base. It's some floral notes in there. And I feel like there's also some light animalic notes in there as well. It's a masterpiece fragrance that was created in 1919 from the House of Caron, historic house that I'm glad that it's still around, and we can, buy and appreciate their fragrances. And in fact, the brand Caron has multiple tobacco fragrances. I have 3 of them. Tabac Exquis is very modern. Tabac Noir is very musky, but tobacco honey. Then they have Tabac Blonde, or not. This is Tabac Blonde. There's another Tabac that I don't have that I should probably get, but this is a really great classic to know about, to have in your collection, and to appreciate, leather fragrances. Fruity. I think there's some fruity notes in there as well, and it gives it a kind of like a ambery glow to the fragrance. So that's Tabac Blonde from 1919 from the House of Caron. Of course, we've got to have this in this mix here. This is Chanel number 5 from 1921. A classic. If you have a chance at watching a French film called Coco and Igor, in that movie, you can actually see how this fragrance came about. This is Chanel number 5, and it's Ernest Beau, the perfumer, and I don't think they mentioned his name in the movie, but I can't remember. I believe I think he came up with multiple mods, and I think there was 5 or however many. She said, my favorite number is 5. Let's go with number 5. And that's what became of the perfume. At least that's what I remember from the film. But I think this is one of the earlier aldehydic fragrances, and it's probably one of the biggest selling fragrances of all time from the House of Chanel. And it's been reformulated for sure. So it's gone through multiple variations or formulations, but I think they've kept the fragrance pretty similar to the original. Obviously, what happens with why fragrances are getting reformulated is because ingredients are being banned or regulated, or ingredients are not easy to find anymore, or it smells different than what it was. So the brand reformulates the fragrances constantly because they're using natural ingredients, and so it can't always smell the same. So it's always constantly being tweaked. So every batch is a tweaking, I believe. So sometimes when you think it doesn't smell the same, it has changed because it's getting tweaked every time. The other thing is the maceration and maturation. Sometimes the fragrances are rushed out the door, and they're not left to mature and age, so that you can enjoy this kind of robust experience rather than having something thin and airy. But Chanel number 5, I think it's a masterpiece. It's not one of my all-time favorite fragrances. I think I prefer Shalimar over Chanel number 5, but I really appreciate this because every time I smell an aldehydic fragrance, it reminds me of Chanel number 5 because I feel like the Chanel DNA is aldehydes. But I feel like there's some musky notes, funky notes, ambery notes, floral notes in here, and it creates this kind of very intense aldehydic balm. So that's Chanel number 5. I do also have to say, some of the fragrances that I'm talking about, probably the versions that came out were the Parfum editions, because back then they were making pure perfume, I think, and I believe Chanel number 5 was launched as a Parfum. And most likely Shalimar was as well. That's the next fragrance we're talking about. 1925. We just celebrated 100 years of Shalimar last year, and 100 years of Chanel number 5 was 5 years ago. So these are very historic fragrances, and some of these are for men, some of these are for women. I think if you're a fragrance collector and you appreciate fragrances, there's really no gender behind these fragrances, because a lot of these fragrances, if you went to the outside of the conventional and designers non-niche world, you'll find these fragrances launched as unisex offerings. So for example, Shalimar from Guerlain, you've got a lot of ambers out there that are unisex made. So Shalimar and Chanel Le Lion kind of have similarities. They do have reminders of one another. So whereas Le Lion is unisex targeted, Shalimar is, women, ladies, or feminine targeted. But between Chanel number 5 and Guerlain Shalimar, I much appreciate Shalimar. It's my favorite style of one of my favorite styles of fragrances, I should say. It's amber. So it's vanillic, it's tonka, there's jasmine, there's iris, there's a little bit of rose here. And it's one of the first ambers. But I also feel like if Infiniment Coty's Ambre Antique is so rough and animalic smelling, maybe Guerlain's Shalimar was also similar to that before it was probably made less animalic. I have a feeling because I've heard and I remember that it was a bit rougher. This seems very smooth to me, but still keeping its classic touches. But it's long-standing offering, one of the best fragrances ever made. And it's so famous that Guerlain keeps cranking out flankers. The Millésime series. The latest one was not that good for me, the Rose, Millésime Rose. I didn't care for it as much. But they have the L'Essence, which is a really, really great take on the original, very modernized. But to me, this DNA is super fantastic. I love it. And it's also in the Jicky that I just spoke about. You can kind of smell it a little bit in there, which makes it so awesome. So you can go from one to the other and say, okay, this comes from Guerlain and things like that. But I think Shalimar by Guerlain is one of the best. So it must be in a collection. If you're a collector, you're appreciating, classic fragrances, you must have that in your collection. So let's move on to the house of Caron once again. I've got 3 Carons here. I think this is one of the best houses. This is Pour un homme de Caron. So this is launched in 1934. And it's cool that my dad wore this, and I remember him wearing it in the 70s. And it's lavender, a lot of lavender with amber, vanillic, and musky notes in the base. It's a men's fragrance, and I feel like it's also kind of Fougère-like, but it's super unisex, I think. But the smell is just amazing. That very aromatic herbal smell of the lavender with the warmth of the vanillic musky notes and the base ambery notes. It's super cozy, very, very cozy, because I find lavender to be soothing, and the fact that it has these kind of warming, kind of inviting notes in the base, it makes for a very soothing kind of an offering. For a while, you can get really great deals on the Parnum de Caron. I think ownership change happened around 2020. And so I believe the Caron Parnum de Caron was not very easy to find at the discounters. I think they're out there now again, finally. And definitely you should have this fragrance in your collection. And what I'm going to let you know also, all of these fragrances will be timestamp tagged. So if you're in the market to buy any of these fragrances, you can via YouTube shopping. So you can click if you're looking at the screen on the left and the bottom, there should be a real small round kind of a button that comes up with an icon or the image of the fragrance I'm speaking about. You can click on that, and it should open up on the phone on the bottom a list of fragrances I'm talking about, or on the computer it should be on the right, and you can buy the fragrances from there. So next fragrance, we're going to the house of Robert Piguet. It's Fracas. So even though I keep telling you guys that Fracas has become very challenging for me, and when I say challenging, I'm not saying it's tough to wear. Something in this fragrance and vintage tuberose is rubbing me the wrong way lately. I don't know if it's a chemistry change on my part, but there's something in it that bugs me. But it is a very important tuberose fragrance. It's also very bubblegummy. And, tuberose floral notes have animalic funkiness. So this has some funk in it. It's not like super stripped away of all of the impurities and only the cleanness is left. It's not anything like Frederic Mall's Carnal Flower. It's not anything like Tuberose Astral from Crivelli. This is super vintage, very powdery, very bubblegummy, in-your-face tuberose. So it bothers me. I wouldn't say I would have a problem wearing this. It's just I'm not liking the smell for some reason. For some strange reason, vintage tuberose is smelling kind of, even though it's a beautiful flower and it's a great smell, it smells a bit ugly to me. I don't know why. But yeah, it's very important to have. It's Fracas by Robert Piguet, which I believe is a fashion house that no longer makes fashion. It only focuses on fragrances now. But I don't know what's going on with the brand, actually, come to think of it. For a while, they launched quite a bit of fragrances, and Arlene Guichard was making a lot of them. He now has his own brand, obviously, Matière Première. But if you look at a lot of the fragrances, like Casbah, one of the fragrances that was launched around the early part of the 2010s, or maybe the latter part of the 2000s, his name comes up. So I haven't seen a new fragrance launched by Piguet in a long time. So hopefully they're not having challenging times. But if you're a vintage floral fragrance lover, you must try Fracas. Let's move on to the house of Hermès. This is Eau de Hermès. And yeah, this is a bit challenging for some people, I think, and on me as well once in a while. If I wear this in the heat, it's quite sweaty and musky, quite sweaty. I think I need cool days for that to be enjoyed. But, I mean, it has a lot of cumin. It's super spicy, very, very spicy, and very musky. Oh my God. Like, there's a sweaty muskiness under there that is trapped with citruses and freshness and spices and fresh spices and woods. But, oh man, I love it. The cumin in here is so awesome, but there's probably also a little leather in here. I think that might be causing that funk, that sweaty, musky funk. But it's a masterpiece. I believe this is created by Edmond Rudnitska. I could be wrong, but you should have this. It's definitely worth having in the collection. It's quite daring, though. Be warned. Okay, that's Hermès Eau de Hermès. Let me know if you're familiar with that fragrance. Look at the back. There, it's cool. I love that. Up next, going to the house of Estee Lauder, we've got Youth Dew next. One kind of fizzy amber fragrance. Super spicy, I should say. I mean, if we're comparing something like this to something like Ambre Antique, they're so different. First of all, this reminds me a little bit of Opium, and Opium obviously probably was inspired by Youth Dew. But there's almost like a stale cola effect happening here. It's not super fizzy, but it's almost like a flat cola. I shouldn't use the word stale. Like a cola that's lost all its fizz. It's an amber, very molassesy, syrupy, and super duper spicy. Josephine Catopano, is that her name? I forgot her name. I think it's a woman perfumer. I don't know much about her. I believe she was with IFF. But definitely one of the masterpieces in the world of perfumery. Beautiful bottle as well. Let me know if you're a fan of Youth Dew. Let's talk about Guerlain once again. We've got Vetiver. I've got a tiny little bit left in my big bottle here. Vetiver, I wore my first bottle of Vetiver in 1999. And my bottle was a special edition of Vetiver with a similar like squarish bottle, but it had these 4 lines going across it that were frosted or against a clear glass. But it's a masculine, grassy, earthy, spicy, woody vetiver fragrance with some citruses up top, and you have some warm spices, but not super distinct. I think, what's the name of the brand? Drawing a blank. So there's another brand that launched a vetiver fragrance, Carven. Carven launched a vetiver fragrance a couple years before Guerlain did. And that Carven vetiver paved the way for Guerlain, I believe. But I think Guerlain became successful with vetiver much more than Carven. Carven has launched or relaunched their vetiver fragrances throughout the years. In fact, in the 2010s, they launched a vetiver fragrance when the brand reintroduced itself. It was kind of in a tall, thin green bottle. And I actually have that, and I have a kind of a boxy white bottle with a kind of a wooden cap. So it's gone through multiple iterations, but I find similarities and also differences between the two. But I think Guerlain capitalized on the vetiver and they won the game or the race or whatever. But this came out in 1959. Eau de Hermès came out in 51. I have not been mentioning the dates. Robert Piguet Fracas in 48. Poirin de Caron, I believe I mentioned, was in 1934. So Youth Dew is 53. Vetiver 59. So just is almost into the 60s. But super masculine offering from the House of Guerlain. And I don't experience the Guerlain DNA in here. Whereas I noticed it between these two fragrances, the Jicky and the Shalimar. I don't pick it up in the vetiver. It's not there. For me, it's not. All right, moving on to the House of Jean Desprez. It's Bala Versailles. Yeah, you have to have this animalic amber in your collection. It's worth it. And apparently they've mentioned, or not they, but I've heard that this was a fragrance Michael Jackson wore. I don't know how true this is, but that's Bala Versailles. And look at the bottom there. Is it not focusing? Darn it. So this is an amber. It's animalic. It's musky. I think it's a little bit aldehydic, very vintage-esque, I think this, you can smell that vintage classic smell in here. It might even have like a civet or something civety happening. I get a little bit of a Kouros-like vibe, but it is a great scent. Super awesome. Quite musky though. This came out in 1962. So I would give you guys a better alternative to this if you want something like this. Although having this in your collection, I think is totally worth it because the bottle is also super gorgeous. But if you want something, whoa, that almost slipped out. If you want something a little more modern, but still paying tribute to something like this and a lot more animalic, look for the Papillon fragrance called Salome. I feel like it's a modern take on, super animalic take on Jean d'Esprit Bal à Versailles. But both would be great to have in your collection to compare between one another and see what this fragrance at one time used to be before all the reformulations. And also, like 5 years ago, I was visiting Fragrance Vault in Lake Tahoe. She had the Parfum edition of Bal à Versailles. If you don't know Fragrance Vault in Lake Tahoe and you're nearby, I highly recommend you go. Tell them Sebastian sent you. She sells a lot of vintage fragrances, so that's a place where you can go, where if you're hearing about fragrances here, it sounds great, but you'd rather have the vintage version, you can go there and see if they have it. They're not going to have everything, obviously, but 5 years ago, she had the Parfum edition of Bal à Versailles. Amazing. Amazing. But as I said, Papillon Perfumery, Salome is awesome. Super, super awesome. All right, back to Guerlain. And I'm going to say that this next fragrance also has the DNA, the girly nod in it, featured in it. This is Habit Rouge in the Eau de Toilette version. I believe the Eau de Toilette was the only version they had. They reformulated in the early 2000s, and then I think in the early 2000s they launched the Eau de Parfum. Is that true? This is what I've read online. This is the male alternative to Shalimar, and I think that's one of the reasons why I get a bit of a similarity between Shalimar, Jicky, and this. But this is a lot fresher. It's got a lot of citruses up top. The citruses are much more prominent than the other notes. And currently they also have the Parfum edition, where the Parfum edition has similarities to the original, but it's modernized and it's got a lot of boozy, patchouli, and things like that happening while keeping the original DNA intact. The Parfum is so good, but the classics are great. For a while, I was enjoying the Eau de Toilette a lot. The Eau de Parfum has always been great, but it's woods, it's vanillic notes, it's lemon, it's a little bit of roses. Maybe beneath it all, there's a little bit of leather in there as well. It's an awesome scent. Definitely worth checking out. And last thing I should say about Habit Rouge, there's a fragrance from the house of Maître Parfumeur Gantier called Parfum de Habit. If you're a fan of the Habit Rouge DNA and you want a little bit more leather and woods and less vanillic notes and rose, I highly recommend you check out Parfum de Habit. In fact, we have a few more Scent Club kits left with kit number 17, where we feature the Parfum de Habit in, and it's something I recommend. You have a little bit of the Habit Rouge DNA in there, but things are twisted around, and the woods and leather is amped up. But let's move on to the house of Dior next. We've got Eau Sauvage. Yes, one of the early citrus aromatic classics for the guys from the house of Dior, and it's so darn good. It's really super fresh, very spicy, aromatic, woody, grassy, and invigorating, tart, kind of astringent citruses together. And it's a easy breezy kind of a fresh, easygoing day, and liberally spray this stuff on. So it's 1966 when this came out, and I still think it's a great scent. It's one of the best men's fragrances ever made, I think. This is also, I think, is it Rudnitska again? He's a master. He's a master, guys. I think this is Rudnitska. I think he did a lot of Dior fragrances. I should do a video on his fragrances. I should. But yeah, Dior Eau Sauvage, one of the best fragrances ever created. I think it's a masterpiece. And same thing with this next one. It's a 1966 once again. It's Aramis by Aramis. Well, owned by Estee Lauder. I almost said Estee Lauder as well. But it's definitely a masterpiece. And this is a fragrance my dad wore. It's a Chypre, leather Chypre. And Bernard Chant is the perfumer here. I think he was with IFF. He created this. And truly classic. Bold, leathery, woody, spicy. And I think the original was an eau de cologne, or maybe it was an eau de toilette all along. There's multiple fragrances that are kind of similar to this that Bernard Chant created. I highly recommend you check out. If you're a fan of this, definitely worth researching what else he's created that smells like this. One of them is for Estee Lauder, and then the other one I'm not remembering right now. It's for a French house. So if you are more budget oriented and you want to explore some of the recreations or similar fragrances that Bernard Chant created, I don't remember the exact date, but look at Grès Cabochard. They have similarities. And even though this is a feminine targeted release, I think it's a very similar style of fragrance to Aramis by Aramis. This might lean a bit more green. But it's leather, it's a Chypre, it's a bit green leaning. But similar kind of base and a reminder of one another. But totally worth highlighting. So yeah, try Cabochard. This is the Eau de Parfum version. And this usually retails for about $20. So not very expensive. But then again, Aramis by Aramis usually is very inexpensive as well. All right, let's move on to the House of Chanel once again. This is number 19 from 1970. I'm going with the EDP. I can't remember which version launched first. There's an Eau de Toilette. There's an Iris version or Poudre version, I think. This is paying tribute to the galbanum note. An amazing, amazing note that I'm obsessed with. It's green and bitter. It's like vegetation, vegetable stems or leaves chopped together. This is kind of powdery, but literally like green bomb, almost neon. What's going on with my table? But yeah, this Chanel number 19 is... I appreciate Chanel number 19 a lot more than Chanel number 5 because I really love green a lot more than aldehydes and fragrances. And I think this fragrance is a masterpiece, and I believe this is created by Jacques Polge. I could be wrong though. Did he create this? No, I don't think he created this now that I'm thinking about it. It's somebody else. But wonderful fragrance. It's galbanum come alive. If you are not familiar with galbanum, there's a video on the channel about galbanum fragrances. And definitely check that out, Chanel number 19. I personally think that's a masterpiece. But let's move on to the year 1971 with Clinique's Aromatics Elixir. And it's another Bernard Chant creation. And he also created a fragrance for Aramis called 900 that are related. They're similar smells. Whereas Man, this is very thinned out lately. Whereas 900 did go a bit more masculine, and the Clinique Aromatics Elixir was a bit more floral. But once you took those out, you're basically left with a very similar formula. But I remember a woman used to wear this when I was very young, and it's a super intoxicating offering. It's amber, it's floral notes like rose, it's patchouli, it's mossy notes. It's a Chypre once again, but amazing smell. I know it's not what it used to be. It's gotten super, super thin, but it's just, the smell is amazing. Yeah, it's classic. Some of you might not like this, but I mean, if you're into fragrances, I think these fragrances should definitely be appreciated. Anyway, that is Aromatics Elixir 1971. Aramis 900, I believe, is fully discontinued. I hope they would bring that back, but they are now launching, focusing on this new fragrance called Intuition. And it's funny, my little nephew has a bottle of Intuition. Go figure that out. Little one, not the older one. The new Intuition from Aramis. Anyway, let's move on to Caron once again. This is Yatagan. Wow, this is so good. I absolutely love how green. I guess 1970s was the green years. A lot of green fragrances launched in the 70s. Chypre style. Ah, this is like amazing. Super amazing. This gets musky. It's very piney, but almost like eucalyptusy, like camphor, menthol. That's the word I was looking for. It's almost like a eucalyptus pine menthol, but super intense, very green and aromatic and woody and spicy. And then, of course, there's some musky touches in there too. Yatagan is amazing. Really awesome scent. 3 from the House of Caron. Definitely a classic house to think about for classic, fragrances or historic fragrances. But I pretty much shared the 3 most important from the house in this video. I don't know if there'll be another Caron in part 2 and 3, but for sure, this part 1, this Yatagan, Pour un homme de Caron, and of course, Tabac Blonde are very, very important for perfumery. All right, let's move on to the house of YSL. It's wait, no, not Kouros. It's Opium from 1977. So as you can see up there, there is a vintage bottle of Opium right here. So this bottle is a bottle created by Pierre Denand, the perfumer, not the perfumer, what am I saying? The bottle maker, bottle designer. He's known for making bottles. And if you want to find out more about Pierre Denand, I've got 2 videos on the channel. One talking about his book and the bottles he's designed. And then one speaking and chatting with Pierre Denand. So you can hear him speak and tell you stories about the bottles he's created. But my mom wore YSL's Opium. It's a very important fragrance. I feel like it's truly inspired by Youth Dew, but it's modernized for that time, even though right now it's considered classic, but it was updated and made more modern. But to me, it's super spicy. And this is also a bit Coca-Cola-esque, but once again, a flat Coca-Cola. It's interesting. I think the Estee Lauder Youth Dew smells stronger than Opium. And this is the EDP, right? I recently bought this for a few videos, and I didn't have this on me before. This is Eau de Parfum. This is smelling so light. Although this bottle is from probably around 2020, and it's probably been macerating in here. This is from late last year, so maybe it would get thicker and denser when it's older. I don't know, but the Youth Dew is smelling stronger. To me, I find very similar stylings. It's an amber, spicy, fizzy, well, flat fizzy, I should say. Coca-Cola that's gone flat. But definitely a masterpiece and something you should have in your collection if you are into classics and you want to build a classic collection. So that's Opium by YSL. And speaking of green fragrances, we've got one more here from the house of Ralph Lauren. This is Polo Green from 1978, created by Carlos Benaim. I guess when he created this when he was very young. He's an IFF perfumer. Ralph Lauren's an American brand. I believe he worked at the New York IFF, International Flavors and Fragrances. So this fragrance and Yatagan are kind of sort of similar, but they're very green, piney, menthol, eucalyptus thing. I love the top here, but the dry down is a bit, unfortunately, been butchered. The leather in this is not smelling as great anymore. But once you get past that, I feel like they came out around the same time. Yatagan in 76, Polo Green in 78. So I think similar inspirations, similar ideas, and similar smells, just going in different directions. This is definitely a Chypre style, and I believe Yatagan is a Chypre style as well. If you don't know anything about Chypre fragrances, there's a ton of videos on the channel on Chypre, Chypre. It's referring to Cyprus, the island of Cyprus, not the tree Cyprus. But Ralph Lauren's Polo Green is amazing. And I'm so happy that I was able to get Polo Crest as well a couple of 3 years ago. I love that fragrance. Polo Crest came out in the early 90s. It's totally not easy to find anymore, but you can still get Polo Green. I think it's still produced. Let's move on to the house of YSL once again. This is Kouros. Yeah, this is a very important fragrance. To me, it is. Kouros, for me, as a young boy, I remember I was around 12 when this came out. When this came out, I was actually 11. So this bottle and this bottle were always close to each other when I was at the, men's fragrance counter at the Emporium, because there was an Emporium near my house when I lived somewhere. And I'd always go through and check out and smell and really enjoy these fragrances. For me, Kouros is the winner between the two. I prefer Kouros more. And there's a little bit of Bala Versailles in Kouros. That Civity musk that I found in Bala Versailles is here. It's super prominent. It's musky, it's Civity, it's a bit leathery, it's aromatic and Fougère-like all at the same time. I think it's a masterpiece. Pierre Bourdon created a masterpiece here. I think it's one of the best fragrances ever made. Yes, this is not vintage, this is current formulation, but it reminds me of the original. It's super dirty. Like, this is like 80s excess fragrance, like in your face, loud, masculine, sexy, intense. Kouros definitely deserves to be in the collection for sure. And then we're talking about Antaeus. I think the reason I like Kouros now more than Antaeus, I don't like the leather in this anymore. It seems like it's broken. It's not smooth. Like, whatever they're using to create the leather, which I believe they used castoreum before, smells like it's broken. Like, it's not smooth. It's not one piece. It's all separate. But it's a leather. It's spicy. It's ambery. It's resinous. It's dark. It's smoky. It's interesting that Chanel gave us this because they also have Cœur de Russie, which I kind of somewhat find similarities and differences between the two. But again, for me, if I had to pick currently which vintage, or I should say which classic fragrance to pick up now, I would go with the Kouros over the Antaeus. But both of them are very iconic bottles. Like these two bottles and then what's coming after this were three of my favorite bottles of all time in the 80s as a young boy. So I would put like that and then that. This is the ultimate and powerhouse 80s fragrances right there. So let's talk about Guy Laroche Drakkar Noir. I wore 4 bottles of this in the 80s. I think I started wearing it around 83. It's super intense fougère, but the 80s style. Very mint forward. Also a bit that menthol-y kind of forward as well. Like almost like camphor. It's super spicy, very cool, crisp, green and aromatic, and this is a very addicting smell. This, I think, is a masterpiece. Like one of the best fragrances ever created. Hands down, amazing smell. And I think this formulation, which I bought about 5 years ago, I think is still pretty decent. And they also have the Drakkar in the orange juice. That's also has similarities to this. And it's a bit more robust if you'd rather go with that. But to me, this bottle is iconic. This bottle is very important to me. And the juice inside still smells great. And it's very cheap too. All these fragrances you'll be able to find under $100. Maybe the Chanel's not. Maybe the Dior. I only have one Dior in here. Go figure. Maybe the... No, I have 2 Diors. I have another Dior coming. But maybe the Dior's not. But the rest, I think you should find deals. Last but not least, it's Dior's Fahrenheit. Very important masculine offering. And as you can see, I've tried to balance this out between men's and women's. And there's, I think, a few unisex in here. I don't know if Jicky was launched as a woman's. I think it's very unisex. Ambre Antique, I can't remember if it was launched as a woman's. So, but Fahrenheit, I remember when this came out, it was this and Jazz together. Jazz is out of production, I think. But this to me, I know it's different. Like the depth is gone with this fragrance because when I remember smelling this in the 80s, it was so deep and red hot smelling, which is kind of developing a little bit. Like it was almost like piping hot, lava-like. Almost like a combo of red hot cinnamon thing and lava, hot leather, gasoline. Now it's super thin, but it's violet leaves, so it's very violet forward. It's also leather, but it's gotten fresh. It's gotten super fresh. Everything is, I think everything is just, it just gets butchered. Remember, everything is getting reformulated every time they produce the fragrance. It's never identical. But I consider it a masterpiece for sure. It just doesn't have that boldness that it used to have. Because I remember I was a little afraid of this fragrance as a young boy. Actually, I was 17 years old when this came out. But I felt like it was too mature for me. Even though I loved Kouros and Drakkar Noir, the hotness that it had felt a little off-putting. But that sadly is gone. But still, I consider it a masterpiece. One of the best classics to have in your collection. And you can also go with the Parfum edition of that, which has gone gourmand, by the way. Boozy gourmand. So if you're more modern, you want a little bit of the classic touch in there, go with the Parfum as long as you like sweet and boozy. But the original, I think, is the original, obviously. There you have it, 25 fragrances to have in your collection if you are a collector and you are really into fragrances. Let me know your thoughts on these fragrances. Do you have them in your collection? Is there something that you've been wanting to add to your collection? And how much do you guys spend in your collection adding fragrances to your collection? Let me know. Add a comment below. But thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please do list below. Please interact with this video, add your comments, reply to other people, like the video, share it, and don't forget to subscribe and click that bell icon, and you'll be reminded of future videos that will come up after this. But also, when you do the interaction on the videos, it helps with the algorithm. Anyway, thanks again. See you guys later. Bye-bye.